We'll wrap up this semester sort of talking about policies and the states. We don't have a lot of time to get into detail in any of them. There are 3 chapters that cover this that we haven't covered, which is education, health and welfare, and environment and climate change. So at least skim through the chapters. The idea here is to sort of pick out or maybe highlight some things that are of interest to you. And if you ever go onto a four-year school, you can often find entire courses spent on any one of these topic areas. So there's lots to discuss and see. So just kind of at least get the highlights and some of the main points. We're going to focus a little bit this week on education. So to begin with, though, I just really going to highlight, this is a fairly short video, just kind of want to highlighting public policy making. So public policy is the government's attempt to solve a collective problem, right? So anything that can be solved individually will be solved individually. Anything that needs, again, the whole purpose of government is sort of solving problems that that someone larger, right, a collected unit has to solve that affects everyone, or at least a significant portion of the public. It's often difficult to solve public problems because the main reason is not everyone agrees that there's even a problem, right? So it's very difficult to get people on board with solving a problem if they don't, first off, agree that it is a problem. So that's the first hurdle. The second is that it often takes a lot of money. And then determination is where does that money come from? And it usually has to be pulled from other programs or other policies that oftentimes people might find more important. So again, it's a balancing of interest of which policies, which solutions get selected. And then the last one is that the problems are very complex. If they're easy to solve, we wouldn't need government, we wouldn't need this larger entity to step in and solve it, it would just get solved. So if the problem was going to be easy, it would have already been solved. So all of these problems are going to be very complex, often hard to figure out exactly what is the cause. And again, that kind of goes along with not everybody agreeing there's a problem, right? They don't often agree also on what's causing the problem as well. So another piece of this is sort of who is making the policy. And of course, we think of government, but we really want to break that down. And we've done that a little bit through the course of the semester. So the legislative branch is going to pass the laws, right? That's going to drive the policy. The executive branch is going to play some sort of role in signing off on the legislation and overseeing the agencies usually carrying out the legislation. The courts have a lesser role in this, but they can affect policy decisions, especially if they're overturning or saying a policy is not okay. If you have activist judges, they may be actively kind of creating policies as well. And then the bureaucracy is probably again, the agencies, the bureaucracy are really the main ones actually implementing the day-to-day aspects of policy that probably affects us the most. Legislature tends to write these big, overarching, very vague general rules, and then the agencies are actually taking those, or the bureaucracy, right, and making them the specific rules and regulations that come out. But there's also others who are maybe not creating the policy, but are definitely influencing the policy. We talked about interest groups, right? Interest groups play a huge role, sometimes in even writing the legislation or the policies that are coming out. And then media and the public more indirectly, but they can affect, right? The media picking up stories about policies, about how it's going to affect the public, can affect or change policies or how they're written. And of course, as voters, and as just the general public, we also have some influence on the government. So there's 2 views on sort of policy that I've kind of got laid out at the bottom. There's sort of a more cynical view as then a more positive view. A cynical view of how policy gets made is sort of this iron triangle, that it's the legislature, the interest groups, and the bureaucracy, and they're really just working exclusively together and really to their own benefit. An issue network is a more positive way of looking at it. It's the same groups, the legislature, the interest groups, and the bureaucracy, but it sees more of a free flowing of information being both in and out of the triangle as well as within this triangle, and really keeping account of all, taking account all parties. And these people are really viewed as the experts, therefore that's why they're working and writing on the policies in order to get the best policy because they know what's going on. So again, that's the positive take on it, whereas Iron Triangle is sort of a negative take on it. So as I mentioned, we're going to kind of focus on education policy, although I do want you to look across at some of the other policies as well. And if anything stands out specifically for your state, include it on your state pages. But you're going to watch a video on the changing nature of the changing the education paradigm by Sir Ken Robinson, and you can kind of listen to him. I think it's a very interesting take. on education and the view of education. It's a few years old at this point, not super old, and I think you'll find that education hasn't changed much since he sort of gave these lectures and really talked about it. So make sure you watch through that video. So my video is actually a little shorter this week, as you're going to focus and listen to a video. It's actually a presentation of his lecture. So as I mentioned, though, don't neglect the other chapters. And I didn't mention at the beginning, but crime and punishment, we actually spent a whole week on that, but that would be another chapter that is tied to policies. So you can talk about policies on crime and punishment, the environment and climate change, health and welfare, as well as education on your state pages. So some of the areas to think about. I put some questions at the bottom. Those are also on our topic discussion for this week, or just some things to think about whenever you're analyzing and evaluating a policy and to kind of deciding, what value does this policy hold? What problem is it solving? Does it actually solve the problem? So some things to think about as you look at policies and look at your state this week.